Monday. It is a new week. It's the middle of January, or a little over. As some of you may know, I really uh, kind of had some real life stuff come up last week. Kind of kept me away. So I didn't get to stream for most of last week. We just did the house tours mostly. And again, we had quite a few of the winter homes. I decided to go ahead and showcase some of the other entrance into the Venus Rising's Winterfest housing competition. So I just kind of did it that way. But this week we're going to be going back to the usual routine, I promise. Today we're going to do kind of a half and half. Last week I mentioned that I was wanting to do like a workshop on lamps and stuff, and I have that as a kind of part of the title for today. But I also had a specific request by a viewer about, well, they asked for a tutorial, and I really hate to call what I do any kind of like tutorial because I really don't give solid specifics. I mean, I kind of do, but I don't. I don't say, okay, this is step one, this is step two. I say, you could do this, you could do that kind of thing. So I call them more like a workshop. It's where we kind of brainstorm ideas. I give examples. I give alternative suggestions and that kind of thing. But I really hate to call it a tutorial because it's really not, for me, housing is not really something you can do like specifically item for item, step by step as someone else. Because for one, if you're doing it like that, then you're basically just copying what they do. You want to learn the technique maybe, but you want to kind of do it in a way that it's more fluid so that you kind of develop your own way of doing it. I don't know how better to describe that, but it's not like there's, a solid routine for every kind of thing you build. Everything comes with its own problems, depending on the items that you use, where you're putting it. If it's in a custom house, you might build a chair the same way every time, but it doesn't work necessarily for every place that you might want to put it. And depending on how you build it, if there's some things that you have to hide, well, in a custom home, that's poses its own problems because you don't have the walls that you can sink it into that a prefab home would have, that kind of thing. So really, whenever I approach a project, it's, whether it's a small little thing or a full plot thing, it's just kind of an experiment every time because there's new challenges and obstacles you come across that you don't otherwise. And so I can't say that this is like, how you do it and this is how you always do it. This is just a kind of a guideline kind of thing. That's why I would prefer to call it a workshop. So today's workshop is going to be about two subjects. I'd like to get into the lamps, but we're going to save that for later if we have time. But we're going to get into talking about water. In the past, we didn't have the winding rivers and the waterfalls. Now that we do, a lot of people have found creative uses for them. I can show you in my mains home that I've used it for the fountain. I'm going to show some examples and then we'll go back to my alts plot and experiment with showing how that we put that together, because I know a lot of people ask for, well, what can I use for this, or is there any way to do that? And people say, well, you just use this and this and this and this, but it doesn't really kind of convey how exactly to put that together. So that's what we're going to do on my alts plot. But here you'll see I've used a combination of the waterfalls and then the winding river. And all I basically did, and I'll show this later, is I set one winding river, and then I just duplicated it and rotated it around to fill it up to make sure that there wasn't any gaps. It's not ideal. For a water feature like this, I would much prefer still water than this rushing water. And of course, I don't have my sound on, but I assume there's some sound effects going on with all of the water stuff. Now there's also, let's see, downstairs or upstairs? Over here. The use of the blue glass, framed or unframed. It depends on what you're using it for and where you're using it. This is just, I think it's 3 layers of glass to kind of enhance the color, but the more layers you put in, the more whitish it becomes. So again, it depends on what you're going for. If you're going for like some kind of like frozen ice, obviously more layers would be favorable. If you're just going for water, 3 is about a good amount. 1 is, it's too faint, it's almost unnoticeable unless you're really zooming in and taking a look at it, but you can see I've got, yeah, the 3 layers. And the distance between the layers, I just eyeball it. If you want to, you know, make sure that you get it exactly 0.05 per, you know, between the layers, it's up to you, but it's just, you know, a different way of doing it. I think that's the only 2 water examples I have. There is the one in the beach area, but it's kind of not exactly the same as I think a lot of people are talking about. But this is, again, just using the rivers and waterfalls to create kind of a water effect. I kind of did it in combo with like almost like a mural painting with the little beach area as well. But oops, can't even spell my character's name right. But for those that are curious as to how one would get started with that, again, it depends on where you're putting it and what use you want for it. Now, a quick way to get water, especially more still water that you want, is to use the fab kits. A lot of people have managed to, and I've toured a few of the homes, so if you look back through the tours, you're bound to come across 1 or 2. Using either the kiddie fab kit, the kiddie pool fab kit, or like the hot springs, and then there's another one like a meditation pool or something. There's like 3 fab kits that have a water feature in them, and since they're all considered decorative, they don't have like challenges applied to them. You can basically cover up everything around the water and just have the water showing, you know, depending on how you want to do it. And the kiddie pool fab kit is probably one of the fave for custom builders, because I tend to see that one the most when they're wanting to incorporate some kind of a jacuzzi or something, and they'll add that in. Of course, you do have to acknowledge that there's a little floaty thing in it, so depending on, you know, how big, how small you're going to have it, it may or may not work for you, but it's an option. For myself, I tend not to use fab kits simply because there are certain issues with them that maybe I have difficulty hiding some of the elements that are around it, whether it be trees or maybe the ground cover or whatever it is. So when I build something, I tend to build it without those in mind. Let's just go inside, I guess. I think the water features might be a little weird. I'm trying to build them out here. Excuse me. Okay, so water features. Typically, when one talks water, we're talking sinks, tubs, fountains, pools, that kind of thing. In fact, there is a pool here on this property. I guess I'll go ahead and show that. This one is just using the glass, and I haven't really layered it, so this is a good example of how 1 layer of glass probably doesn't quite cut it. The reason I left it 1 layer was I didn't want to, one, there's a lot of lighting, so the lighting kind of enhances that coloring as well, and the more layers you have, the brighter it gets. And I didn't want it to kind of blind you as you looked into the pool as well. I wanted it to be visible. So mine's like super clear water, but you can see that there is a layer there. It's just very light, very faint. Um, the disadvantage to using the glass and to using other objects, which I will show you later or in a bit, is as you can see, you can't go through them. They're not. They have the collision, built in. So it's like you're walking on the surface. The disadvantage of using the actual winding river and the waterfalls for a water effect, from above it looks great. It looks like you're actually kind of wading or swimming in it, but it's paper thin. So if your camera goes below, then everything underneath, is just gonna still look kind of, non-watery. It's not like it's not like we get a cube of water and it looks like kind of like the underwater effect of the sky plot itself that some people use. It doesn't have that watery, hazy look with a little bit of, particles or something going in it. So, both of them have their pros and cons. From above, the moving water looks a little bit more realistic because obviously it's got some animation to it. But again, like I said, you have to kind of, if you've got a little kitchen faucet running with a waterfall, you're going to have to contend with the noise that it makes. So it's going to be like this really rushing waterfall sound in your kitchen. But if you can get past that, if you're just going for the look, the aesthetic of it, then yeah, that'd probably work really well. Okay, so a fountain, like the fountain we did in the Sky Plaza. Basically, I just started out with some hover part pieces. I tend to use those quite a bit now. I think a lot of other builders are discovering how versatile a lot of those pieces are, especially if you combine them in certain ways. They can make some interesting architectural features. But we're just going to go with the plain old, if I can find it. Oops. Going to go with the curved full pipe, which is basically the same thing that we used here, and I probably would be better off just copying that, but I'm just going to piece it down. It always comes in really huge. That's okay. So we're going to knock this down a little bit in size, just so it's not really, really big. Just do it about that size. And then I'm going to straighten it up. Okay, so you typically would start with whatever shape, structure, base structure that you're wanting to fill with water, and hope that whatever you're using for the water works. Others might go the opposite. They'll start with the item that they want to use for water and then they build around it. It really depends on what you're planning to use for water, on what will work best. Let me see, electronics. For instance, if you're going to use this as your water, and I know people say, oh my gosh, it's got all this writing and stuff, how's that going to look like water? When we were limited with a lot of the items, and some are a little bit more difficult to obtain, you work with what you get. So I've seen pools made out of this, and they just kind of ignore the fact that there's text and other images running across it. They're just looking for that bluish bit, and they want, this is really good because it doesn't have the collision in this little area here. So if you enlarge it and then just build around all its bracketry, you can actually get kind of the same effect as you would the winding rivers and stuff. You can actually pass through it, which is what some, were aiming for. And you just had to look past all of the animation. But for this, you might start out with the item and make it the size and the orientation that you want, and then build around it, whether it be rocks or walls or whatever it is that you're going to be using for your structure, depending on what you're aiming for. If you're looking for a more natural thing, then rocks and trees and things would be what you would line it with to kind of make your own homemade hot springs or something. And then wood and walls and things like that if you're going for more of a pool kind of feature. But for the purpose of this one, we're just going to be using the winding river. So since I've already done it before, I'm confident that it'll fit. So I'm just going to going to quickly lay in a little circle here. Now, if you want to get fancy and make it more like a pill shape, have curved on the ends and some straight edges, here, have it straight and then just curved. That's up to you. For me, I'm thinking fountains, so usually those tend to be kind of round for the most part. So I'm just going to leave it that way. Okay, so there's your base of your fountain. And what I did for the other one was I can't. Other people might be able to, but I can't find the center of this conveniently, easily off of one of the items that are already there. So what I did was I took a dome. We'll just go with whatever we have here. And I centered it up. I just kind of eyeballed it. Basically made it roughly the same size, diameter, or whatever you want to call it, as the object itself, and then just kind of tried to figure out where the center was. And then I used the dome as the centering piece. You'll see why I want to do this here in a moment. That's pretty close. Okay, so I have this dome piece, and then it's centered into this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a winding river. River winding. And then I'm going to copy the orientation of this. Now, it could be that it flips it over, I don't know, but there we go. So, in my eye, it's in the center of that. So I'm going to size it down. And what you want is you want it to be just enough. I mean, it doesn't have to be really huge, but you don't want to go outside the outer edges of whatever object you're using. So you want to get it as big as you can, because the bigger it is, the fewer gaps you will have to kind of mask over. But again, you want to make sure that it doesn't come out the outer edge. I'm going to place that down, and then I'm going to remove dome, and then I'm going to sink this in. And that, put it whatever level you want. I'm just going to stick it right there. That'll be good. Okay, and then what I did was I just duplicated it, and then I rotated it, and as I rotate, I watch to see if there's any gap, and I just would only rotate enough so that there's no gap. There's going to be overlap, and you'll see that there's some kind of flickering because it's like smack dab on top of each other, right kind of in the same place. But as you place them, that isn't as noticeable because the animation there is pretty strong anyway, so it kind of doesn't really show up. And then you just keep doing that. You just keep rotating. You just mostly watch, this is the narrower end, so I watch it mostly, and if I see a gap, then I stop. And since that one's the wider end, it seems to do fine. If you want to do it where you start off at 0, 0 on one, and then you do the cross and all that, that's fine if you want to do it that way. I just start off with the thing and just kind of just go around in a little circle. And just keep doing it until you get it fully covered. And if it's centered nicely, it should be so that it's not sticking out anywhere. And voila, there you have a little pool of water. You can use it as a tub. Oh, looks like I didn't overlap that one very good. But you could use it as a sink, a water trough, whatever you like. Like that one's gappy now. Just kind of keep checking it. Okay, that looks pretty good. So there you have your little wading pool there. For the fountain, I just kind of went and did other layers and used the waterfalls flowing into it to make it look like it's, you know, being poured in. Later, I assume Carbine will add some effects that looks like spraying water, so you can actually get the splashing effect of the waterfall coming down. Other people use like the buoyant blue crystal. It has a little sparkly effect that could be kind of a way to convey the spray. The blue flare is another one. It's more smoky in effect, but depending on where you're using it and how you're using it, it looks pretty good for, like, especially a really big waterfall. You have this bluish, light, white, hazy smoke coming up, and it gives that illusion that there's some water coming out. There are other things that you could use to create water that isn't that doesn't have the luxury of being able to pass through. There's the tiny blue crystal. There's the folded shirt. There's the there's the exile sign. I've seen this one used quite a bit back in the day. Some people still use it, but you know, it's getting fewer and fewer because a lot of people are relying on the winding rivers and waterfalls to do a lot of their water effects. But I saw someone use this in the past before. They just built around it and made the blue as the water for a tub. And I saw another one use it for like a swimming pool. You just kind of tuck that in and hide the edges that you don't want showing. You know, put some bits here, make this thicker, you know, and then you have this like little bluish pool of water thing. Like so. The Space Suite, that's another one. If you turn it upside down, it's got this nice shiny blue. Even the tall file, I use that for water, like in bowls and buckets. For example, I don't know if I've got any buckets. Wow, I've got a lot of buckets. So say you have your bucket here, you just your file in there, turn it upside down. Bring it up and then just size it. Mostly you're just aiming for not having it stick out like this. You don't want it poking out there. So you just kind of size it just enough where you can kind of sink it in and it looks like the bucket is filled with water. I've seen other people use the Space Wheat the same way. It's a bit more, the file is shiny. So yeah, it looks like water. Looks like a dewdrop really is what it looks like. The Space Wheat is more of a really deep blue. Trying to think some other examples of water stuffs. For the glass, if you rather do that, you could just, again, just use the layered effect. See. Bowl. Oops, a bowel. Bowl. So we're going to pretend this is a pool or something. Now this is where you'll get into issues. Again, it depends on what kind of item you're using, how you're hiding the edges and things. It's not like I can take this bowl and fill it with a square shape of water, you know, the glass, and then have it look right because it's going to have corners poking out. Wow, did I just like turn that up? Okay, so you see we have the water at a nice level, but notice the bits poking out. You're not going to want to have that. So you have the option of maybe duplicating the bowl, sizing it up, tucking it down so that you still have that effect, but then you're kind of covering it up in that way, that kind of thing. Let's see. Probably not exact, but still some little corners sticking out. Something like that. So you have the water in it, but again, this one's so fair and light, you'd probably have to add several layers to get it to come up. Now, the reason I offset the layers is because I don't want it coming into that problem of having it flicker. So I always offset it a little bit. So something like that. So now you have a little bit of water. But again, it's going to be where you don't actually fit into it. But you know, if you're looking for some water, you could put like maybe this be the base of a fountain as well, or like a little koi pond or something. You put some fish and some moving plants, and that'll help give the illusion. There's also, aside from the blue flare and the buoyant blue crystal, there's also the medical cot hovering. I don't think I have one of those. But it has that bluish kind of, I don't know what to call it, like a aura type thing that depending on where you were putting this, you might be able to kind of sneak that underneath and have it give some nice effects to it, and to help feed that illusion that that's in motion even though it really isn't, because that's where you come across these plots that have these nice little ponds or rivers or things before we got the actual moving water, and still kind of really made some nice water features that look, believable. There's one, in fact, I'm thinking of off the top of my head on Dominion side, where they had an indoor pond, and it looks really, really fantastic. But it's because they, use a combination of effects items and decorations that kind of lends itself well. Any of the moving plants, like the has like a wind breeze animation going on, those really help to convey that there's some motion there. Same thing goes for, like, if you're trying to go for an aquarium effect. Some were hoping that maybe the water decor that was coming in would be able to be used for that. The river, the winding river, and the waterfall, they're kind of see-through, but they're a little bit more opaque than probably most would want for like an aquarium type of feature. But just also the animation kind of throws it off a little bit too. You might could put one like a river. Let's see if we can try and make an example here. Like, you might could have the river as the topper to the aquarium. Just gonna find this here. Notice I'm chopping it off by sticking it into the wall. Kind of a cheater way of doing it, but it works. Get it here, I think. It's probably not a perfect square, I'm sure, but it's just a general idea. So you could probably use the moving water for the top of the aquarium water, like they were gonna make a little square aquarium thing, and then use the framed glass for the walls. Now these don't have a particular, they don't come in different shades like the unframed glass does. So these typically just have that bluish look. Works fine for water, or aquarium water. Now this is going to be really, really messy, because again, I'm just kind of, let's see, what's an easier way to do this. Now, if you're wondering, like, if you really wanted to do it like this, you could cover the back with like the machinery and pretend like it's the filters or something for the water. But this is just a really rough example. Probably the water wouldn't come right up to the top, so you'd have it more like so. And then you could place the cap to it and all that kind of stuff. The main thing is you don't want this sticking outside the glass that you have framed in. You want to get it as nice and straight as possible. So with the winding river, it's going to be a little tricky because it's not perfectly straight. It's obviously a little little wompy. But that gives you an idea, and then you could fill in your little ground cover and maybe use treasure pile for the colored stones on the floor of the aquarium, stone steps or obsidian stone, whatever you want. Use one of those purple arches for the thing where the fish go through it and that kind of thing. Plushies that you could use, the sunfish, the shellac, um, even agar, like the little miniature ones, or make your own. I've tried that in the past. It's not as easy as you would think, but I'm sure there's some clever people that could come up with some nice custom fish. I wouldn't say that you would want to layer this to try and convey that there's some depth to the water. I would leave it just the moving part up at the top, kind of simulate that it's filled with water, and let the glass itself kind of portray that a little better. If you want to give some difference between this glass and the glass that supposedly got water in it, you could take some of the unframed glass. Can't spell with a flip. And clearly you want to use the blue. And instead of having it fill up the whole bit, just make it even with where you have the top of the water. And then just do that again. Oops, that'll be the wrong one. Let's just move that out of the way for a second. And you don't want to layer it too thick, because you don't want that the layering showing through on this side right here. So you want to keep it within the distance of the framing itself. So that may determine if you make a really big frame or a little frame or whatever, but you're just I'm trying to darken up the water so it looks a little different, showing there's a contrast between the actual water and the clear glass up above, like so. And then of course you do the same over here. Just turn it. Again, I'm so poorly eyeballing this, but you get the idea. And I'm only going two layers deep, so it's not super bright. But there you can see the difference, how it looks okay, but just adding that extra little dimension kind of makes that water seem a little bit more solid. And then, like I said, you could top it with whatever you need to. You could top it with a poster. Like so. You have it. I've seen some where the aquarium is kind of got a little gap in the front, and that's where they like feed the fish, where they put the little net in to scoop out the ones that they need to do, or whatever. And it's just a really, really rough example. Super rough. But that gives you a good idea for, an idea for an aquarium if that's what you're wanting to make. We've seen lots of them. A lot of them use like the tanks, like the clunky fire extinguisher, or some of the ichthyon tanks. The problem with the ichthyon tanks, a lot of them have an added effect that kind of brightens up the water, and it seems to intensify the bigger you make the tank. So once you get it really big so you can actually put stuff in it, it's so bright that you can't see it. Now you can kind of alleviate that by changing the lighting in the house. It might not work so well if you're doing it on the exterior, but on the interior for sure. I know that in the past some fellow builders were using it, and they discovered that if you make the lighting a little bit darker, then you can see through that brightness of the water for the tanks to actually see inside them. But the brighter the lighting in the room, the harder it is to see through it. It just really depends on what you're aiming for. Let's see, trying to think some other water things. Again, when you're using the rivers or the waterfalls for interior stuff like toilets and sinks and bathtubs and things like that, just keep in mind that the sound effects will possibly be an issue. If you can ignore it, then maybe it's not that big of a problem. Because most builders understand that, it's kind of like using something really noisy like the conveyor belt. It goes with the theme of what you're going for, but maybe you just don't like all that noise. Sort of like an engine or something. Sometimes you just want the noise, but you don't want the thing that, the object that it comes with. So it, it can be either or. It's just, sometimes there's some compromise involved. Just like with the screens and things, we have the standing view screen. There's the exile wall panel that I showed earlier. There's the Starship bridge monitor. There's the Marauder displays that I myself and others have used in the past as aquarium features, and others have used like those for swimming pools and things like that. Most of the ones I just named have some kind of an animation or like a little grid pattern like this, or it's kind of like glowing off and on. You just kind of have to debate amongst yourself as to whether or not, is that going to detract, or is that going to be something that people can overlook based on how you're using it. So yeah. So that's just a quickie discussion about water and different kinds of things that you can use for it. Like I said, there's lots of things that are bluish that you can use. Most of them have a collision that's involved. Not all of them, like the standing view screen, you can actually, the bigger it gets, you can actually walk through it. But again, it's got the animation. There's a Tua portrait thing that is the same way. And there's some that use it for other than water effects. They use it just for like hidden doors and things like that. But like the glass and the file and the shirt and the tiny crystals and things like that I mentioned, those are more for just visual. They're not practical as far as if you're wanting to look like you're standing or sitting in the water. If you're not worried about that, then those others might be more suitable because they're a little richer in their color, and the shape of them might lend themselves better depending on what you're using them for, that kind of thing. And it could be other shapes of water, or forms, I should say. Like the tiny blue crystal made a good ice rink for my plot in the past. For example, the plot I did for a guildmate last year, we had a nice big pond and a white tree in the middle of it, and the pond was actually just a giant space suite turned upside down. It took a long time for me to get it the right size, and it's not a perfectly flat bottom, so you had to kind of tilt it and keep messing with it until you got the shape that you wanted. But you know, it was a pretty nice rich blue, and then I used lots of the hovering medical cots to give it a kind of animated look. So um, there's just lots of options. A lot of it is just experimenting because, you know, maybe, like I said, you don't want a perfectly round pool. Maybe you want one that's kidney shaped or rectangle or whatever. So certain objects might lend themselves better. It's great that you get this animated water, but maybe you're limited on how much decor you can spend on a particular feature. This one kind of eats up the decor count, whereas if you just put a couple of square pieces of glass to simulate a water kind of feature, it saves you a few pieces. So, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into it. Um, just Also, you know, some items may be easier to obtain than others. Thankfully, these water features, the waterfall and the winding river, are straight off the housing vineyard. They're relatively inexpensive, so just about everybody can use them in various ways. Um, but like I said, you know, maybe you don't want the noise, maybe you don't want the animation, you want something a little bit more calm and still, or use a combination like for this little quickie makeshift aquarium. So that is, I guess that's about all I can say about water. I know the person that approached me asked for a specific, like a tutorial, and again, I don't see how you could do that unless they say, hey, I want one that looks just like this, and then I would go through it step by step. But again, I prefer not to do that because I want to inspire people to ideas of their own. You know, maybe someone kind of makes something like this, but I'm sure they'll make it their own by using different parts for like the top and the sides and the back and all that. But so yeah, so the other thing I wanted to talk about was lamps. We're going to go ahead and go back to my mains plot and go to the lamp store because you know, one of the ideas behind the Sky Plaza was I wanted to be able to change out items as I came up with new approaches to them. And these have been up for several months now. I've just been preoccupied with other things so that I really haven't been able to spend too much free time just doodling around with ideas. So I thought today, or this week, I should say, would be a good time to kind of experiment some more. So we have this little shop dedicated to lighting, and we do have some decor to kind of got quite a bit of space freed up after we moved out some of the holiday stuff. So what I thought we'd talk about is different types of lamps. Right now we're showcasing mostly table lamps, ones that you would find on maybe in the center of a dining table, like these candle sconce thingies, or a nightstand for your bedroom, living room lamps, that kind of thing. But there's also the ones that you can find hanging on the wall, like the sconces, or ones from the ceiling, like the chandeliers. One of my favorite for the chandeliers is, I don't think I have it, but I'm gonna check, yeah, is the nautical wheel. Uh, doesn't have a wheel on it, so it's not a good example, but the nautical wheel is a good one. If I can get a hold of some of the pieces this week, I'll set one up here. But I'll just quickly describe it. Basically, it's just the nautical wheel. What I do is I usually start it out on the floor, put the candles on it that I want on there, and then I add the chains, and then I just lift it all up until the bits are there. It's much easier to work at ground level for me than to have it dangling from the ceiling and be trying to angle my camera just so that I can see everything. It's just much easier to do it kind of down on character level for me. So that's a tip. I do that a lot. Same way with the dome that I did. It's up above. I did that all on ground level first. Um, but like the sconces that hang on the wall, those are you can make a wide variety of those. Candles are probably among the favorite for the wall sconces because, again, candles don't count towards your lighting count, um, and they just look kind of a little classic. But it really depends on if you're actually wanting some light to come through, or if maybe you've got some lighting hidden behind the wall and you're just wanting the candle to look like it's lighting the room. So probably the quickest sconce holders out there are bowls. Um, you can have a regular bowl, there's the metal bowl, and the yellow bowl. We'll just try one of each and kind of show you an example. So naturally, if this was a prefab, well, if this was a custom built house, generally speaking, most people don't build their walls between the rooms with space between them. They just have the one wall and then there's a room on either side, and it's got that really thin depth to it. There's a plus side to that. One is it's just one piece, for that little spot. So that means you're saving, if you build a square room, it only takes 4 pieces, essentially, to make up that room. However, if you've got something on the other room, a room on the other side of that thin wall, and you want to hide some of it, then you have to contend with the fact that it's going to be showing on the other side. Whatever part you're sinking in is going to more than likely be poking through on the other side. To avoid that, you could add padding to your rooms. So instead of just the little square room, you add a space, like your insulation area, and then make another room so that there's a gap between them. And that's kind of how I did these divisions for the little shops. There's actually a thickness to them, so they're not, and I did that specifically for instances like this where I wanted to poke something into the wall, hide it, so that it wouldn't be poking out into the other shop. It's not always going to be the case, depending on what items you use, how big you make them, and all that kind of stuff. But I definitely wanted to build some cushion there, to some invisible space to, eat whatever I'm sinking in there. So just a thought. For a prefab home, you really don't have that problem because all of their walls, you sink them in there. But if you're, adding some of your own walls to divvy up the rooms, keep that in mind. It makes it tougher, and it's even worse for custom built houses because most people don't think about adding that space, because it's just something most people don't. When you're building, you're thinking, oh, it's going to look cool, and then it's like the house I did, a custom house on one of my alts plots. I didn't think about doing it for the walls, but I did remember to do it for the floor because the place is actually on stilts. So I didn't want any of the stuff that I was sinking into the floor of the house poking out at the bottom, so I thickened that up. There's a bit of a base to it, even though there's a lot of space between the ground and the bottom of the house. It's just things you want to kind of keep in mind. So we're just gonna copy this candle here. I like the tall ones. One of my favorite. You don't have to use the tall one, but I always do, just because that's me. And then we're gonna shrink this down to about a good appropriate size. And the main thing is you don't want the candle poking out at the bottom. But that's an example of what I'm talking about, a wall sconce. If you want to add a little bit more, you could. Same way here, just different kind of make that one a little bit like so. You could use just about anything really. The Drake and Cauldrons, just really anything that has that little shape that you're going for. I've seen some actually take existing sconces and just add some decoration to them to kind of dress them up a bit, which I will show here in a moment. I'm just going to show some examples of bowl sconces and then we'll move on. You could add some greenery maybe, you know, if you want to, say you have these sconces in your walls already and you maybe wanted to dress them up for the holiday, just add some little greenery and you're good to go. Woo. Like super huge. There we go. So there's a couple of examples. Now, say we have my favorite and because you want some actual light, maybe you want to use this, but you don't like the look of it, you could just change it up with a different kind of, you could use, again, bowls, domes, maybe just add wow, my little controller is going all over the place. I've seen some that look like a little cylinder kind of thing. You do that. This is really chunkily put together. It's just to give an idea. You don't have to have same look every time. Might be kind of a plain Janey way to do it, but you still get the lighting, you just don't have the look of it. You know, for whatever reason you want to cover it up. You just add some decoration to it. You can take, like say you wanted it to look like a granite looking thing, a lit up rock, I don't know. But you can use existing lamps and stuff in different ways. Like I often see the table lamp for the heart collection being used as a chandelier. One example of a quickie way of doing something a little different. I've seen some lamp posts where people will, and I've done it myself, looking for a example. That amount. But something like this one, where I'm just gonna throw it out here, but I'm not gonna buy it, hopefully. Where it's actually got a whole pole, but you don't want to use the pole, you just want the light itself. I can the sizer to work right. So they just kind of sink it into the wall and hide it that way. I've seen those used with like the brass lamp posts and things like that. It's just a different way of looking at the same, an actual existing lamp source, lighting source, and just kind of using it differently. It's like we took the Drake and Brazier, shrunk it down, and used it as a light. I'm ignoring that there's smoke coming off of it, obviously, but you could do it differently. I've seen some take, for example, these hanging ones and have them upside down and using them as lamp poles. Do that a lot. Seeing what all kinds of lighting we got here. String lights. Okay, nothing. But like, I think it's called the fancy hanging lamp. It's like a little green bit. They'll just use it like this. They'll just stick it as if it's the lamp itself. Now, I don't think that one actually moves. This one has a little bit of a sway to it, I think. Maybe not. As long as it doesn't move, it doesn't look kind of odd if you use it in a different way. But if there's any kind of movement, it might not be the best choice. Now, I say that, and I use the hanging lamp. Notice it doesn't have any movement, but some of the lamps, they actually do. They kind of sway a little bit. Those probably wouldn't work really good with the kind of setups, but it's an idea. But I'll definitely get some pieces together to set up, show how I make the nautical wheel candle chandelier. I've done that in the past when I did the Snuggly WildStar for my tribute to Tangled, the movie. I used that for the little bar in the bunker house. That was really fun. I think the trickier part was I didn't actually copy the chandelier, because the chandelier, there was like 5 or 6 of them in the room, and I made them different, each one. I arranged the candles differently. So you start out with the essential bit with the chains, the 3 chain bits going up to the ceiling, and I think I used a hammer for the little connector to the ceiling, and of course the wheel, but I rearranged the candles for each one so they didn't look repetitive too much. So it's a fun little idea, and I've seen other people use it since then. So and again, it's really handy because the candles, they don't count towards your lighting count, which is very important as well. Again, lamps, basically anything can go if you're not really worried about them actually having a lighting effect. If you're looking for them to have some kind of lighting, then yeah, that might become an issue as to what kind of lights you can actually use. Like these two particular, especially this one, gives off some light. It's good for, same way with this one. They have that light effect, but if you don't want that, or it's not necessary, then you don't have to be tied to using the same looking little thing. Uh, Again, notice the sconce shows up until I get really close, so that's another thing you want to keep in mind. One of the problems we've been having with items being shrunk down is they get to where certain things are visible from a distance, and it makes it hard to make a nice screenshot of things when they kind of start disappearing. So it's another thing to keep in mind. Using items that are naturally, they don't go below the 0.20. Typically those show up better. But yeah, so I will work on getting some more items for this, and we'll talk about some more lamp ideas, and we'll start seeing about changing some of these out into some different stuffs, just to kind of mix it up. And what we're going to do is probably over the next weeks, at least until we get a little closer to the next holiday, we'll just start either adding or exchanging out items for all of the shops that we have around here. So we're going to start with the lamp shop, and then we'll just work our way around. In the meantime, I hope you guys had fun today. I know it's not a super exciting episode. Not that any of them are, but you know, there's no combat kind of stuff going on. But I hope at least some of what we discussed today helps somebody when they're trying to think of ideas for little decorations for the home. Maybe most of their living room is all standalone, come as is stuff, but maybe they want one special little piece, and making your own kind of makeshift lamp can kind of help add some personality to an otherwise day-to-day room. It's also a great way to tie in a motif, like if you want this motif to be carried out from your kitchen to your living room to bathroom, you could use that bowl in various ways to kind of keep that motif showing up, and that helps tie in, give some unity to your home. Even if you do nothing else, that would be something that you can kind of give a little extra to all your rooms. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and call it good for today. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate all of the positive, helpful comments, and of course the suggestions as well. I hope that the individual that asked for kind of a tutorial on water stuffs found what we did do, even though it wasn't specifically a tutorial per se. Found it helpful. And of course, if anyone else has some specific questions about a different, kind of element, feel free to let me know. Yeah, I know that the Winterfest stuff is over, but be sure and check out the homes that were built either specifically for the Winterfest housing competition or just happened to be there and they kind of added some extra decorations. Be sure and take the time to take a look at them. I can't guarantee that all of them will still be there for a few months down the road or forever. I know of at least 2 that they were built specifically for that, just to be able to keep them. They're on alt, so that you don't have any immediate plans to get rid of them, but it'd be a shame to kind of miss out on seeing that in person if you can. Because videos and screenshots only get you so far. It's really different when you actually come into a plot face to face with all of the wonderful elements. And we had a lot of fantastic homes that the builders just kind of went above and beyond. And I just want to promote that again. And of course, congrats to all of our winners. And a big thank you to everyone that participated. It was a very fun experience for me. While I didn't get to participate myself in the sense that I didn't compete, I certainly had a wonderful time getting to kind of not nitpick at them, but to kind of evaluate them with a fine-tooth comb. I really spent a lot of time going over all the details and wanted to be as fair and you know, thorough as possible. So hopefully folks were happy with the results. And if you weren't, I'm sorry, but can't make everyone happy. And while Nilia would have been delighted to be able to give everybody a prize, that just wasn't in the stars. There was limited prizes. So anyway, hopefully with the next competition, whatever it may be, not necessarily housing related, but whatever it is, there will be lots of people participating in that because, you know, a lot of people don't, I think some people don't realize the effort put in to these community events. And I really want to stress that even if you don't plan to participate yourself, just spreading the word about the event or encouraging friends or guildies or such that might be interested, encouraging them to check it out and to get involved, that helps. It makes those who host these events more likely to host them again. And when it comes to this kind of a game, community is really a big part of things. And if there's nothing going on in the community, it can get a little depressing. So big kudos to everyone who contributes in that way, whether it be providing guides or guilds, guilds that focus on bringing in new players and helping them learn the game, or events like this, like the competitions or the races and costume contests and things like that. It's really important, and I just want to give a big shout out to everybody that engages in that kind of community contribution, because it is important. It is a necessary thing to keep the community thriving, and I would hate to see it go to the wayside due to lack of participation. So I'm really appreciative of those that took the time to get involved with this one, and I hope there's even more the next time around. Until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. It's a little colder out here, so hopefully everyone is staying good and toasty and warm. Again, we'll probably be back tomorrow with some more lamp discussion. Again, I'll work on getting some of the materials that I need, and we'll play around with some ideas and add some new lamp features. And we'll, like I said, just go shop to shop and see about playing around with different ideas for different elements, be it chairs, beds, whatever. Until the next big holiday, which we suspect is going to be Valentine's Day, but who knows what they're planning. I don't know if they're going to have an event tied around it or if it's just going to be just an introduction of new decor and mounts and things like that. We'll see. But as it gets closer, we'll possibly get into some workshops on that. In the meantime, have fun. Good luck with your projects, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.